When our micromanaging HOA president ordered the removal of my solar panels, she had no idea she just messed with the CEO of NorthStar Energy Group, setting off a chain of events that would expose years of neighborhood corruption and environmental hypocrisy. What would you do if you caught your HOA president accepting kickbacks from fossil fuel companies to block clean energy in your community? Welcome to my channel. Comment below where you're watching from. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across my lawn as I pulled into my driveway after a month-long business trip, finalizing our company's massive renewable energy expansion. Something immediately felt wrong. The sleek solar array that had adorned my roof for the past 4 months was gone, leaving only mounting brackets and disconnected wiring dangling like broken promises. A bright yellow notice had been taped to my front door, the paper still crisp despite the gentle breeze. Violation: unauthorized external modification. Solar installations require written board approval per covenant section 17-3. At the bottom, a handwritten note read, "These unsightly panels decrease property values and create dangerous glare. Respectfully, Eleanor Blackwood, HOA President." I stood there, stunned, staring at the roof where my $45,000 cutting-edge solar system had been just 30 days ago. The system that powered my entire home with clean energy. The system that I'd meticulously researched and had professionally installed by veterans from the Sunlight Alliance, a non-profit helping former military personnel transition into green energy careers. My hands trembled with anger as I took photos of the damage. The installers had followed every code requirement, kept everything low profile, and even painted the mounting hardware to match my roof tiles. There wasn't a single valid reason for removal, especially not without proper notice or hearings. Just then, a silver Tesla pulled up across the street. Eleanor Blackwood stepped out, her salt and pepper bob perfectly styled as always. She wore tailored linen pants and an emerald blouse that probably cost more than some people's monthly mortgage. She pretended not to notice me as she collected her mail, but I caught her glancing at my roof with a satisfied smile. "Eleanor," I called out, keeping my voice measured despite my rising blood pressure. "What happened to my solar installation?" She turned slowly, her pearl earrings catching the sunlight. "Oh, James, welcome back. I'm afraid your panels violated several community guidelines. The board voted unanimously while you were away." She gestured toward my roof. "So much more attractive now, isn't it? Traditional aesthetics maintain our property values." I wanted to tell her who I really was, that I wasn't just James Reynolds, retired Army Major, who moved in 8 months ago. That next week's press release would announce me as the new CEO of NorthStar Energy Group, the company that managed the entire regional power grid. But something told me to hold that card close for now. "Where are my panels?" I asked instead. "In storage at Valley Services," she replied with a wave of her hand. "Frank Valley handles all our community maintenance needs. You can retrieve them for a reasonable fee." She checked her Apple Watch. "The office closes at 5 p.m. Better hurry." As she walked away, I noticed Councilman Richard Davis pulling into her driveway. He was on the city's energy committee and had repeatedly blocked municipal solar initiatives. Their friendly embrace seemed more than just neighborly. Inside my house, I pulled up our HOA documents on my laptop. After 2 hours of searching, I couldn't find any specific prohibition against solar panels. In fact, state law SB 1487 specifically protected homeowners' rights to install solar energy systems. Eleanor had deliberately violated state law. My phone buzzed with a notification from the HOA app. "Special board meeting tomorrow. Vote on updated energy policy." The timing was too convenient to be coincidence. Through my window, I watched Eleanor and Richard talking in her kitchen, both occasionally looking toward my house. My neighbor Diane Chen from 2 doors down walked her dog past my driveway and paused when she saw me in the window. She glanced nervously at Eleanor's house before hurrying away. I pulled out my phone and called my executive assistant. Maya, I need you to do some research on Eleanor Blackwood and Valley Services and find out everything you can about our HOA's financial records for the past 3 years. While waiting for Maya's callback, I drove to Valley Services just before closing time. The small office sat at the edge of an industrial park, its windows tinted too dark to see inside. A brand new sign advertised Valley Services, Property Management and Removal. The removal part looked freshly painted. Frank Valley greeted me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Reynolds, right? We've been expecting you. I'm here about my solar panels, I said. Ah, yes, those unauthorized installations. He slid a form across the counter. Storage and removal fees come to $3,200, cash or certified check only. $3,000, that's extortion. Frank shrugged, his gold watch glinting under the fluorescent lights. Administration fees, specialized handling, safety protocols, it all adds up. He glanced at the clock. We close in 10 minutes. As I studied the invoice, I noticed a smaller logo in the corner, Valley Energy Consultants. Something clicked in my mind. I'd seen that name before in my company's records. They were a fossil fuel lobbying group that had opposed our recent clean energy initiatives. My phone buzzed, Maya sending me files. As I opened the first document, my suspicions were confirmed. Eleanor Blackwood wasn't just an overbearing HOA president. She was also listed as Valley Energy's Director of Community Relations, and Richard Davis was on their board. I looked back at Frank, my military training helping me maintain a calm expression. I'll need to verify these charges. I'll be back. Your loss, Frank said with a smirk. Storage fees increase by $200 daily. As I drove home, pieces started falling into place. The solar panels removed from 3 other homes in recent months, the HOA's sudden interest in traditional aesthetics, the mysterious new gas generator installed in our community center despite rarely losing power. They had no idea who they were dealing with, but they were about to find out. Sometimes the biggest mistakes come from underestimating the quiet neighbor, or in this case, the veteran who ran the power grid they depended on. I couldn't sleep that night. At 2 a.m., I sat in my home office surrounded by HOA documents, the blue light of my laptop illuminating stacks of papers. Maya had been extraordinarily thorough, sending me financial records, meeting minutes, and property transactions dating back 5 years. The pattern emerging from these documents made my blood boil. Eleanor had become HOA president shortly after joining Valley Energy Consultants. Within 6 months, she'd replaced our community's previous maintenance contractor with Valley Services, owned by her colleague Frank. Coincidentally, that's when the first solar installations began disappearing. I traced 15 cases in our neighborhood where homeowners had installed solar panels, only to have them removed for violations. In each case, Valley Services charged exorbitant removal and storage fees. Most disturbing were the 3 cases where homeowners couldn't afford the fees. Their solar equipment was declared abandoned and sold at private auctions. Who bought? Them. Shell companies that traced back to Valley Energy. A calendar notification popped up on my screen. The press conference announcing my CEO position was scheduled for exactly 1 week from today. I'd planned to use that platform to unveil NorthStar's ambitious community solar initiative, bringing affordable, clean energy to neighborhoods across the region. Eleanor and her fossil fuel friends were going to hate it. My doorbell rang at 7 a.m. I opened it to find Diane Chen standing there, nervously glancing over her shoulder. "I saw them take your panels," she whispered, stepping inside without waiting. "For an invitation. They did the same to my brother last year. Diane explained that her brother Michael had installed a small solar array to power his medical equipment after returning from combat in Afghanistan with a disability. When they couldn't afford Valley's removal fees, they lost both the equipment and eventually their home. Eleanor convinced the board that solar panels attract undesirable elements to the neighborhood. Diane said, her voice bitter. She said veterans like my brother could afford proper power bills if they wanted to. My jaw tightened. As a veteran myself, this hit close to home. Do you have any documentation? I asked. Diane pulled out her phone. I've been keeping records. Since Michael lost his house. Screenshots of conversations, photos of other removals, recordings from open HOA meetings. The evidence was damning. In one recording, Eleanor explicitly mentioned keeping alternative energy out of our prestigious community. In another, Frank detailed how removal fees could be inflated through technical language that homeowners wouldn't understand. I thanked Diane, promising to handle this discreetly. After she left, I made a crucial call to Sarah Okafor, NorthStar's legal counsel. Sarah, I need everything we have on Valley Energy Consultants, and I need to know if we can expedite the announcement of my position. By midday, Sarah had delivered a comprehensive file revealing the extent of Valley Energy's operations. They weren't just accepting kickbacks from fossil fuel companies. They were actively sabotaging solar adoption across multiple communities, creating a network of HOAs that enforced anti-renewable policies. The financial trail showed suspicious deposits into Eleanor's personal account within days of each solar removal. The special board meeting was scheduled for 6 p.m. I arrived early, setting up my laptop at the back of our community center. Board members filtered in, followed by Eleanor in a designer suit, Richard Davis at her side. Frank Valley slipped in just before the meeting began, taking a seat near the exit. Eleanor tapped her gavel, calling the meeting to order. Tonight, we're voting on updated energy guidelines to preserve our community standards, she announced, her voice dripping with authority. The proposed amendments would explicitly prohibit all visible renewable energy installations. I raised my hand. Point of order, I said, standing up. State Law SB 1487 explicitly prohibits HOAs from banning solar energy systems. Eleanor's smile tightened. We're not banning them, merely requiring they be completely hidden from view, which effectively means not on rooftops. That's still illegal, I countered, producing printed copies of the law. The statute specifically states that HOAs cannot impose restrictions that significantly increase cost or decrease efficiency. Richard Davis stepped forward. As a city councilman, I can assure you we have legal precedent supporting aesthetic restrictions. I projected a document onto the wall, Richard's financial disclosures, showing significant investments in natural gas companies and consulting fees from Valley Energy. Interesting perspective from someone with such clear conflicts of interest. The room erupted in murmurs. Eleanor banged her gavel repeatedly. This is outrageous. Mr. Reynolds, you're out of order. Actually, I said calmly, changing slides to show Valley Services invoices, I'd like to discuss these removal fees. Did you know that California Civil Code limits storage fees to actual and reasonable costs? These $3,200 charges seem excessive. For removing solar panels, Eleanor's face flushed. Valley Services is a respected contractor. A contractor that shares an address with Valley Energy Consultants where you happen to be employed, I replied, displaying corporate registration documents. That seems like a significant conflict of interest you never disclosed to the board. Board member Tanya Williams, a retired accountant, stood up. Eleanor, is this true? You never mentioned working for Valley Energy. Before Eleanor could respond, Frank Valley hurried to the podium. This meeting is getting off track. We should table this discussion and what? Continue removing solar panels illegally? Called out a voice from the door. Michael Chen wheeled himself into the room, Diane behind him. They took mine last year, cost me my home. Other neighbors began sharing similar stories. The Martinez family had their panels removed during a 2-week vacation. The Patels lost theirs after questioning HOA fee increases. Each story matched a corresponding payment in the documents Maya had uncovered. Eleanor frantically attempted to adjourn the meeting, but the board, seeing the evidence mounting, voted to continue. I connected with our IT specialist at NorthStar via my phone, gaining remote access to the community center's audio system. Suddenly, Eleanor's voice filled the room. A recorded conversation between her and Frank, discussing how to maximize fees and keep those ugly panels out of our neighborhood. Where did you get that? Eleanor demanded, her face pale. That's illegal recording. It was captured by the security system you installed last year, I replied. The one that backs up to the same cloud server that NorthStar Energy manages. Frank bolted for the door, but found 2 police officers waiting outside. They'd been called by Sarah Okafor with evidence of consumer fraud and conspiracy. Eleanor glared at me with pure hatred. You have no idea who you're dealing with, she hissed. I smiled politely. Funny, I was about to say the same thing. The community center buzzed with tension as Eleanor's recorded voice continued to fill the room. These eco-freaks and their solar obsession are cutting into our arrangement, her voice echoed. Valley Energy pays us good money to keep these neighborhoods dependent on the grid. Eleanor lunged for my laptop, but I smoothly stepped aside. That's private, she shouted, her perfectly maintained composure crumbling. Actually, I replied, all HOA business is legally required to be transparent to members. Speaking of transparency, I clicked to the next slide, showing bank transfers from Valley Energy to Eleanor's personal account, each correlated with a solar panel removal. Richard Davis attempted to salvage the situation. As a city councilman, I can assure everyone that what you're seeing is being taken completely out of context. These payments are legitimate consulting fees. For consulting on what exactly? Asked Mrs. Patel from the back row. How to best remove my son's science project solar panels that powered his bedroom? The room erupted in angry voices as more neighbors connected the dots. Eleanor's phone buzzed incessantly, likely Valley Energy executives realizing their scheme was unraveling in real time. This meeting is adjourned, Eleanor shouted, banging her gavel so hard it cracked. Security, remove this man immediately. So, community center security guard, a retired Marine named Joe, who I'd chatted with several times about our shared military experience, simply folded his arms. Mom, I think we should hear him out. Eleanor's face contorted with rage. You work for the HOA, for me. Actually, Joe replied calmly, I work for the community. I nodded gratefully to Joe and addressed the room. There's more. Valley Services hasn't just been removing solar panels. They've been reselling them at massive profits. I displayed photographs of a warehouse filled with solar equipment. This is their storage facility. Those are your stolen solar panels. Michael Chen wheeled himself to the front. That's my system right there. I can tell by the custom mounting brackets I fabricated. I continued. Valley Energy has been systematically blocking solar adoption across 6 counties, working through HOAs to create technical violations, then confiscating equipment that they resell out of state. Board member Tanya Williams, who had been furiously taking notes, stood up. I moved to immediately remove Eleanor Blackwood from her position as president for undisclosed conflicts of interest and ethical violations. The motion carried with overwhelming support. Eleanor, seeing her control slipping away, played her final card. You'll regret this, she threatened. Valley Energy supplies consultants to the State Energy Commission. We can make life very difficult. For this community, think about your power bills next summer when temperatures hit triple digits. I couldn't help but smile. That's an interesting threat, Eleanor. Perhaps this is the right moment to properly introduce myself. I projected my NorthStar Energy ID badge and upcoming press release onto the wall. I'm not just James Reynolds, retired Army Major. Effective next week, I'm the new CEO of NorthStar Energy Group, the company that manages the entire regional power grid that Valley Energy depends on. The color drained from Eleanor's face. Richard nearly dropped his expensive phone. Frank, who had been detained in the hallway, could be heard cursing loudly. "You're bluffing," Eleanor whispered. Officer Ramirez, who had been quietly observing from the door, stepped forward. "He's not. The department was notified about his appointment last month as part of our critical infrastructure security protocol." "This whole time," Eleanor stammered. "Yes," I confirmed. "While you were breaking state laws and targeting veterans like Michael and myself, you never bothered to check who you were really dealing with." The meeting erupted into applause. Neighbors began sharing more stories, not just about solar panels, but about other abuses of power they'd witnessed. The Jacksons had been fined for their native plant garden that looked too wild. The Rodriguez family had been penalized for their children's basketball hoop. Each violation conveniently resulted in maintenance contracts for Valley services. As police led Eleanor, Richard, and Frank away for questioning, neighbors spontaneously formed groups, already discussing how to reshape our community. Michael Chen was immediately nominated for the vacated board position. Diane began collecting contact information from affected homeowners for a class action lawsuit. Local news vans arrived outside, alerted by residents' social media posts. A reporter approached me with a microphone as I stepped outside. "Mr. Reynolds, can you explain what happened here tonight?" I looked directly into the camera. "Tonight, our community discovered that the people entrusted with protecting our neighborhood were actually exploiting it for profit and environmental sabotage." The reporter's eyes widened as she recognized the implications. "And you're about to be announced as CEO of NorthStar Energy?" "That's correct. NorthStar believes in a future where communities can choose clean, affordable energy without interference from fossil fuel interests. What happened in our neighborhood appears to be part of a larger pattern of corruption designed to prevent that future." Eleanor was being escorted to a police car when she lunged toward me, breaking free from the officer. "For a moment. You think you've won? Valley Energy has connections throughout the state. This isn't over." Officer Ramirez calmly restrained her again. "Ma'am, threatening the CEO of critical infrastructure is taken very seriously these days. As the police..." Cars drove away. Neighbors gathered around me with questions and gratitude. Mrs. Patel brought out samosas. The Martinez family offered cool drinks. What had been a community divided by fear was quickly becoming united in purpose. Back inside the community center, Tanya was already reviewing the HOA finances, discovering years of inflated maintenance, contracts, and questionable expenses. "They've been charging us double the market rate for landscaping and passing the difference to Valley Services," she announced, shaking her head in disgust. Michael Chen had rolled up to the board table, examining the solar policy documents. "These restrictions were never legally adopted," he noted. "They bypassed the required 30-day comment period." I watched them work, feeling a sense of pride in how quickly the community had mobilized. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Should we move up the press conference? News is breaking about the arrests." As I considered the question, Joe, the security guard, approached with a thick folder. "Sir, I've been keeping my own records. Eleanor and Frank have been removing solar panels from veteran homes across 3 counties. My brother-in-law's VA-funded system was taken last month." I took the folder, my resolve strengthening. "Tell your brother-in-law his system will be returned, and so will everyone else's." I texted Maya back, "Move up the press conference, and add something to the announcement. We're launching a Veterans Solar Rights Initiative, effective immediately. The morning dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for what we had planned. My phone had been buzzing non-stop since 5 a.m. with calls from reporters, energy industry colleagues and neighbors. The NorthStar press conference had been moved up to 11 a.m. and our PR team was working overtime to manage the unexpected publicity. I stood in my driveway, surveying the activity throughout the neighborhood. The community had transformed overnight. Houses that had been quiet for years buzzed with conversation as neighbors spoke openly about Eleanor's reign of fear. Doors that had remained firmly shut were now wide open, with people sharing coffee on front porches and comparing stories. At precisely 8 a.m., the first trucks arrived. Not Valley Services vehicles, but NorthStar energy maintenance crews. I'd called in every favor I could, mobilizing our entire field operations team. Their mission, restore every single solar installation that had been wrongfully removed. Michael. Chen directed operations from his wheelchair, clipboard in hand, matching serial numbers to addresses. "The Rodriguez family is next," he called out, pointing crews toward a modest ranch-style home where 3 children watched wide-eyed from the front yard. News vans lined the street, cameras rolling as crews unloaded solar panels and mounting equipment. A reporter approached me as I supervised the installation at the Patel residence. "Mr. Reynolds, is it true that Valley Energy was systematically targeting veterans' homes for solar removal?" I nodded grimly. "The evidence suggests they specifically targeted homes where they thought residents couldn't fight back. Veterans with disabilities, elderly homeowners, working families without resources for legal battles. But today, that changes. By 10 a.m., we had restored 7 solar systems, with crews working efficiently in teams. The first newly reconnected system came online at the Chen residence, where Michael's medical equipment once again drew power directly from the sun. The small gathering of neighbors erupted in applause as his system display lit up, showing energy flowing into his home. Diane Chen wiped tears from her eyes. "My brother hasn't smiled like that in a year," she whispered. At the community center, Tanya Williams had set up an impromptu headquarters, collecting documentation from affected homeowners. "We've identified 23 cases in our neighborhood alone," she reported, "and we're receiving calls from other communities reporting similar patterns." As 11 a.m. approached, I changed into a suit for the press conference. The NorthStar board had unanimously approved my accelerated appointment and our new initiatives. The company's stock had already jumped 7% in pre-market trading as news spread about our stand against fossil fuel corruption. The press conference was unlike anything NorthStar had ever done. Instead of our corporate headquarters, we held it right in our community park, with restored solar homes visible in the background. Rows of chairs filled quickly with reporters, industry analysts, and neighbors. NorthStar's board chairwoman introduced me as a leader who lives his values before I stepped to the podium. "Today marks a new chapter for NorthStar Energy and for energy consumers everywhere," I began. "For too long, powerful interests have worked in the shadows to prevent Americans from choosing how they power their homes. That ends now." I announced 3 major initiatives. First, the Veterans Solar Rights Project, providing free legal assistance to veterans whose renewable energy systems had been wrongfully removed. Second, a Community Energy Independence Fund offering grants to neighborhoods transitioning to distributed solar generation. And finally, a comprehensive audit of all HOA energy restrictions across our service territory, with legal challenges to any that violated state or federal law. NorthStar believes that the grid of the future is one where communities generate their own clean power and use the traditional grid as backup, I stated firmly. "We're putting the power, literally, back in the hands of the people." The response was overwhelming. Veterans groups immediately pledged support. Environmental organizations offered to partner on community outreach. 3 state attorneys general announced investigations into Valley Energy's practices within hours. Back in our neighborhood, the transformation continued. By sunset, 15 solar systems had been restored, with crews working into the evening. Under portable lights, the Rodriguez children served lemonade to the workers. The Patels brought out trays of homemade food. It felt less like a construction project and more like a barn raising from another era, a community coming together. At the police station, Eleanor, Frank, and Richard were facing serious charges. The evidence collected by neighbors, combined with financial records Sarah Okafor had subpoenaed, revealed a scheme that stretched back 5 years and across multiple counties. Investigators had frozen Valley Energy's assets pending a full investigation. 1 week later, our neighborhood held a special meeting to elect a new HOA board. Michael Chen was unanimously voted president. His first official act was to pass a right to renewable energy amendment to our community bylaws, ensuring no future board could restrict solar installations. The former Valley Services storage facility was repurposed as a community renewable energy center, offering classes on solar installation and maintenance. NorthStar funded the program with a special focus on training veterans for careers in clean energy. As for my roof, it now sports the most advanced solar array available, a prototype from NorthStar's R&D department that generates twice the power of conventional systems while maintaining a low-profile aesthetic that even Eleanor might have approved of. 2 months after that fateful day, I received an unexpected letter. It was from a neighborhood association in Phoenix, describing a situation eerily similar to ours, an HOA president working with a local power company to block solar adoption. They'd heard about our story and wanted advice. I invited their board to visit our community, now known throughout the state as Solar Valley. They spent a day touring homes, meeting residents, and learning how we'd transformed our governance. They left with a detailed playbook for fighting back against their own corrupt leadership. 3 other communities contacted us that month. Then, 5 more. A movement was growing. Eleanor Blackwood's sentencing hearing finally arrived 6 months after her arrest. As I sat in the courtroom, watching her in her prison jumpsuit, a stark contrast to her designer wardrobe, I felt no satisfaction, only resolve. The judge ordered her to pay restitution to all affected homeowners and sentenced her to 5 years for fraud and corruption. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked how it felt to see justice served. I pointed to Michael Chen, who was giving an interview about the veteran solar program that had already helped 50 former service members reclaim their energy independence. That's what justice looks like, I said. Not punishment, but transformation. Eleanor tried to keep our community dependent on fossil fuels. Instead, she inadvertently sparked a renewable energy revolution. Last week, I received an email that made me smile. A neighborhood association in Eleanor's new community, ironically a retirement development near a coal plant, had contacted our Veterans Solar Rights Project. It seems their HOA president, a man named Gerald, had been imposing similar restrictions on clean energy. They'd recognized Eleanor from news reports and started investigating. The cycle of accountability continues, and so does our mission. Sometimes the most powerful change begins with one person standing up for what's right, even when, especially when, powerful interests try to shut them down. My solar panels now power not just my home, but a vision for the future. And that's a connection that no HOA can ever sever. Today marks the 1-year anniversary of what the media now calls the solar revolution. Our community hosts an annual celebration, complete with a solar-powered concert and clean energy fair. Children climb on Michael Chen's special demonstration rig, learning how sunlight becomes electricity. The most profound change isn't visible from the outside. It's in how neighbors now greet each other, the community gardens that have sprung up in once empty lots, and the veterans support network that meets weekly in our community center. Eleanor was released early for good behavior last month. In an ironic twist, the only housing she could afford was in our now thriving solar community. I spotted her yesterday, sitting alone in the park, watching families enjoy the new playground, built with money saved from our reduced energy bills. I walked over and sat beside her. The silence stretched between us before she finally spoke. "You could have exposed me immediately," she said quietly. "Why didn't you?" "Because this was never about you, Eleanor. It was about building something better." She nodded slowly, watching the solar tracking flowers the neighborhood children had built, each panel following the sun like a technological bloom. "They're actually quite beautiful," she admitted. "Sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemies, it's watching them join your cause."